Arsenal 1, Brighton 1, a game where Kai Havertz and João Pedro got the goals, but the talking point will be the referee. It was a bit of an end-to-end game in the second half. Arsenal did have chances to win it 2-1 through Havertz at the end. Potentially Saka could have put one in. And obviously Brighton did have a fair few chances to win it 2-1, but it ends 1-1. And I'm not one on this channel to talk about refs and talk about VAR and decisions and that. I just like to talk about football and analyse the football. But in this instant, the game was completely changed by the ref. The game was completely changed by VAR. We're going to have to talk about that VAR decision, or that refereeing decision on Declan Rice, because it changed the game. Arsenal went down to 10 men. They lost their, possession. Brighton had 64% possession, which I think is the most the team's had at Emirates in a very long time. And Brighton grew into the game. Now, Arsenal themselves had 5 big chances and Brighton had 3 big chances. And Arsenal did weirdly, even with 10 men, do enough to win that game. Now, I don't want to discredit Brighton because I thought Brighton played really well. I think João Pedro is an absolute baller. And I think that Brighton caused Arsenal problems even before the red card. But I do think had Declan Rice stayed on the pitch, I think Arsenal would have won that game. And I do think that the red card for Declan Rice was harsh. And I'm going to talk about why. And I think this sums it up perfectly, as H said here. Yeah, this is wild. Guessing they give it to him for kicking the ball away, but I saw João Pedro boot the ball 30 yards down the pitch in the first half and he got nothing for it. Again, it's the inconsistency of these rules and how much they fluctuate. It's weird officiating. Now, in the rule book, Declan Rice can get a second half for booting the ball away. But he didn't boot the ball away. He tapped the ball away a few inches. But the problem is, João Pedro, before that, boots the ball at the pitch, no card, but Declan Rice taps it and is also kicked by Veerman, who is clearly making the most out of it, trying to make a point, and Declan Rice is the one sent off. Now, I'm saying this as a Manchester United fan, but sometimes the rules are silly and they're used in the wrong way. I think sometimes you've got to have an element of perception. If every time someone kicks the ball, the ref has given them a yellow and that ref has continuously done that for everyone, fair enough. Even if I think it's harsh, fair enough. But you can't not book João Pedro. Even Saka could have got booked at the end for stopping play. And then, Declan Rice, the one player who's on a yellow, give him a second yellow. It almost felt like the referee wanted to take Declan Rice off. And I didn't want Arsenal to win. I wanted Arsenal to drop points, especially because I'm annoyed at how we dropped points to Brighton last week. But Chris Kavanagh, Arsenal's win percentage is 20% less when they play games against Chris Kavanagh. And I believe Chris Kavanagh was the referee that gave Delo a second yellow when Man United played Liverpool. It was so clearly a Man United throw-on, and Chris Kavanagh gave Liverpool a throw-on when it literally anyone could have seen it was a United throw-on. It was so obvious. He gave Liverpool a throw-on. Delo complained, so he booked Delo for complaining. And then Delo complained that he got booked for complaining, and then he gave Delo a second yellow for complaining that he got booked. So he gave Delo 2 yellow cards in the space of a minute for complaining, even though Chris Kavanagh was the guy that got the decision wrong. Delo got sent off for it, and it reminds me of one of those moments. Not as bad, because I get why Declan Rice could be sent off for that, but I do think that it was a little bit unlucky, especially when you realise that Havertz was choked in the last game. Joel Linton didn't get sent off for doing stuff to a player in the Newcastle, not Southampton, Bournemouth game. I think when you look at it, you think the referees have got to be more consistent. So I can understand in the letter of the law that's a yellow, but I think perception-wise, there's a letter of a law to say that is a yellow, but actually, is it a yellow when you think about it? And if it is the letter of the law that's a yellow, why is that not being applied to consistency? And I think the problem with VAR is, had João Pedro been booked and had Saka even got booked at the end, I think you can just say it's harsh, but it is in the letter of the law. It's like Man United's offside goal versus Brighton last week. Even if Xerxes didn't touch the ball, would have gone in, it would have been a goal. It was a really good and fair goal by United, but because it touched Xerxes' knee, he couldn't get out of the way. It was ruled out. And instead, as annoyed as I am about that, it's in the letter of the law. But I think Arsenal fans generally do have a point to say here when they can say, look, like Declan Rice basically taps the ball and he's getting a second yellow, but João Pedro's booting the ball and nothing. I think Arsenal fans have every right to be annoyed because the card completely changed the game. I don't like to talk about VAR. I don't like to talk about refs and cards on the show because I feel like that's what everyone does, and I don't want to be one of those people that sits there talking about the ref, especially when it's not my team. So I don't really care. But if Havertz can get choked to no card, but Declan Rice can do that and it's a second yellow, Arsenal fans do have every point and every reason to be annoyed because it was just silly. I think the referee was trying to make a point like, I'm the referee, I'm in charge, and the one thing I'm going to say, and I said this last week, and someone said I'm just salty that Man United lost to Brighton last week, but I said this last week, amount of times Brighton players should have been booked versus United and nothing. They didn't get booked to the end, and then the Man United player would commit their first foul and be booked. So, like, we committed half the amount of fouls as Brighton, but we had all the bookings and not Brighton in like the first half of that game. Because I think there's an unconscious bias to Brighton from referees. And I've said this for over a year. I'm not saying this because of the United game that we lost. I'm not saying this because of the Arsenal game. I've been saying this for over a year. There is an unconscious bias in referees to Brighton. I've been saying this for well over a year. Because the last 3 times Man United played Brighton, I feel like Brighton can make loads of fouls and nothing, and we touch them when we're booked. Every time I watch Brighton play, they get away with fouls more than any other team because they play good football. They're a nice team. You know, they worked their way up. But I think there's an unconscious bias in refs in Brighton. I think whenever I see someone big play Brighton always get the benefit of the doubt. And I will say that. But anyway, let's talk about the match. I want to talk about Saka. I want to talk about Havertz. I want to talk about some things we learned from the match. Because, look, there's a long season ahead for Arsenal. And you're going to drop points here and there. And I think, you know, some Arsenal fans will be reactionary and say, oh, the season's off, the season's off. But I think this is something you can look back at the end of the season and say that was a really big point. Or, oh, that was 2 points dropped there. But how many times has Manchester City dropped points early in the season and then won the league? Pretty much every season City won the league, they dropped points early in the season. And if you look at the fact that Brighton is a very good side and looked up to it this season and looked top this season, they've had probably one of the best transfer winners. I actually think on paper, Brighton had better transfer winner than West Ham. I think Brighton are a phenomenal side. They caused United problems. They tore over Everton, and that City have dropped points early on and still won the league. I don't think Arsenal fans have any reason to panic, any reason to worry, or anything like that. I think they probably would have won the game, but the ref did influence the game heavily. Now, I want to talk about Kai Saka. I can't find his full-time numbers, but this was his numbers from the first half when Arsenal had 11 men. And he had 11 touches in the final third, most touches in the opposition box, which was 8, most duels won 5, most possessions won 4, most take-ons completed 2, most shots 2, most shots on target 2, and most fouls won 2. And he's now just the second Arsenal player after Thierry Henry to assist in the opening 3 games. So thank you for the FPL points, Saka. But let's talk about Bukayo Saka, because I think that he's a phenomenal player, Bukayo Saka. I really do. And I think with Bukayo Saka, you know, he always makes things happen. When Arsenal, and I've always said, and I've said this before, I've always said with Bukayo Saka, you know, you've got a special player who, because when Arsenal went down in the dumps and not very good, he was putting in shifts, pulling Arsenal, you know, out the scraps. And now that Arsenal are a good side, he's still flourishing. Some players can only flourish in bad sides, and they go to a good side and they can't do as well because everyone around them is better and they're not being the one relied on. And some players can only be good in good sides but can't do it for a bad side. Like Phil Foden can't do it for England. He can only do it for City as a system player. But Bukayo Saka is one of those players that no matter who he plays for, no matter what system is, he'll put in a shift. And it was a good assist for him today. Maybe he could have got a goal, although it was quite difficult for him to finish that right at the end. And I did think that Arsenal, you know, the game could have gone either way. Brighton could have won it, Arsenal could have won it. There was danger there in transition. But I think Bukayo Saka is an absolutely special, brilliant player. He always makes things happen, put in a good assist, and I think he is an unbelievable player and a game changer for Arsenal. But Kai Havertz stole the show again today, and I do sums this up well. 18 goal contributions in his last 17 league matches. Whether you like it or not, Kai Havertz has turned into a very good Premier League striker, and it's true. Kai Havertz is a number 9. His 18 goal contributions in his last 17 matches. He doesn't take penalties. If you take away penalties, he's got the most goal contributions in the Premier League in terms of like non-penalty goal contributions to the Premier League in 2024. You know, Kai Havertz has been very, very good in 2024. He's been very, very good since about December. I think he's gained some confidence in December and he's looked really good. He's looked like Leverkusen Havertz and he's not looked back. And I'm assuming Arsenal fans will be hoping that Arteta does something similar with Sterling. But I saw this tweet on Havertz, and this is exactly what I've said in previous videos pretty much, and exactly what I was thinking. The main thing about Havertz is his movement. When watching all of his shots across time at Arsenal, so many arrive from him losing his marker by shifting one way and then another, or by finding space inside the box and just ending up completely free. He may not be that fast, he may not be that strong, but to be honest, his finishing still lacks a bit of power. But that intelligence, I believe he's shown recently, is carrying him far. And this is Alex who said he's an opportunist, but he thinks Kai Havertz is on for a 20-goal season. And I think Kai Havertz is on for a 20-goal season because I knew how good he was the back end of last season. I was like, if he can continue that, he's on for a 20-goal season. Now, I will say this, and I wanted to include this tweet because Kai Havertz's movement off the ball was one of the best. He's a poacher. He can appear in the box in space out of nowhere. He's so unpredictable and hard to mark. And I think that's exactly why Arteta signed Havertz. It was a really good finish for him. Yes, right at the end of the second half when he was through on goal, maybe he could have finished there. And I think he's not always the fastest, he's not always the best finisher, but he's an intelligent player that makes Arsenal so unpredictable and brings Arteta an outlet. I think he's a very good player to have. I thought David Raya was absolutely incredible today for Arsenal, put in an absolute shift. And if you look at statistics here, Arsenal did have higher XG than Brighton, but Brighton had a higher expected threat. David Raya did have quite a bit to do as well. I do want to say this. I don't think that Ben White had his best game. I think Ben White is a good player. I think he's a solid player. I've always rated Ben White, but I think Matoma was causing him issues. I think Thomas Partey sometimes physically looks a little bit out of it, and I think with Declan Rice now being suspended for the Tottenham game, that could be something Arsenal struggle with. But I think for the most part, every Arsenal player, had a somewhat decent performance, and they played quite well. And I think had it not been for the red card, Arsenal would have won. But I do think Matoma caused Ben White quite a few issues, if I'm going to be totally honest. I think defensively, I've seen Arsenal look a lot better than how they played. And I think João Pedro for Brighton, he was a player that I spoke about in summer in regards to someone United could look at. I think he's a phenomenal player. Most duels 110, most touches in the opposition's box 9, most take-ons completed 4, most possession won in the final third. I think João Pedro is a phenomenal player. And look, it was a player that I wouldn't mind at United, and I think he'll go to a big club soon. Arsenal fans, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.